What is going on, everyone? It's Justin here, and today I've got a video comparing the iPad Pro 2020 as well as the newest generation MacBook Air, and these two updates were announced at the exact same time about a week ago, and I'm just going to talk about which one students should get. So based on some of the last videos we've done, it seems like a lot of you who follow me are students, and as someone who's a student about 2 years ago until I dropped out of the business program, I feel like some of the most asked questions that I got from classmates were whether they should get a tablet, a computer, or which computer. And with so many offerings on the market, I decided to take the two products that are around the $800 to $1,100 price point and compare them. If you guys like videos like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop a like on this video as it helps a ton, and leave a comment down below as to which one you would pick, and I've also done a review of both of these devices. So for starters, the configuration I'm going to be talking about is the iPad Pro in the $799 base 11-inch option, as well as a $170 smart keyboard, because I do feel like that is a bit of a necessity, but if you want to get the Apple Pencil, then that's going to add to the cost. On the MacBook side of things, it starts at a price of $999, and even though that is a pretty good starting point and being Apple's cheapest computer, I really don't recommend you get that one. I recommend spending $100 and getting the i5 because it is quad core versus dual core on the i3. That is going to give you a pretty decent boost in performance right off the bat just from spending that extra $100. So in terms of price alone, we're looking at $1,100 on the Air and $799 plus $170 for the keyboard on the iPad Pro. So in terms of storage, the iPad now comes with double on the base model, and that is 128 gigs versus the 64 in the 2018 one. And the MacBook comes with 256, which is also doubled from the 128 in the previous year. So just to break things down categorically, it really does come down to the department you're in. And if you're just needing notes and doing emails and stuff, web browsing, then both of these are going to be very capable. But the MacBook, if you're going to be managing a lot of files, I feel like the iPad and the iOS file system is still not that intuitive. If you're in computer engineering though, or coding and development, then the MacBook is going to make a lot more sense just because of the programs that are available on it. But if you're in the artistic space, then the iPad actually has a lot of benefits that you're just not going to get from the MacBook. And that includes the ability to use a pencil. This lets you do some drawing, retouching, and the options are literally limitless, and the display on the iPad is incredible. So when it comes to display, both these are going to be very good for multimedia. I would argue that the iPad is more portable and easier to use, and the MacBook screen is definitely not the brightest, as it peaks at around just under 400 nits. Personally, I just don't really find that that is bright enough for outdoor use at least, or in bright situations. It is a Retina display though, which is nice, and on the iPad side, you have a 120Hz ProMotion display with 240Hz touch panel, and that is probably the best that you can find in a tablet. The 240Hz is really noticed in the sensitivity and the low latency of the Apple Pencil. So in terms of processing speed, the 2020 iPad Pro didn't really see any upgrade from the 2018 model. It is essentially the exact same chip with an extra core enabled in the GPU. The MacBook, on the other hand, did see a pretty good jump from last year, with the base model being the i3, which I've mentioned to avoid, but the i5 model specifically is probably going to be the best bet because between the i5 and the i7, the differences aren't massive. By having quad core on a MacBook of this size, that is nice, but the base clock is about 1.1 gigahertz and the max clock is about 3.5, but you're not really going to be able to hit that because of the thermal limitations of the MacBook Air. The iPad, on the other hand, is more limited by its software than its hardware in my opinion, and it is extremely powerful. They didn't really have to make any major upgrades to that, and you can actually even video edit on the iPad using LumaFusion, and it works pretty well and has a lot of similarities to Final Cut and iMovie. So if you're needing computing power, then I feel if you're doing Photoshop or Lightroom and stuff, the iPad has had no hiccups whatsoever, whereas on the MacBook you're able to run it decently, but at some point you are going to run into some difficulties. Video editing, on the other hand, is doable on the MacBook if you're just editing in 1080p, but as you move up in the resolutions, it is going to be limited, and you might want to look into either waiting for the 14-inch Pro or buying a used 13-inch Pro from 2019. As for the typing experience, the MacBook Air definitely wins in this category with the new keyboard that is no longer the butterfly, and it has 1mm of key travel, and it is kind of the perfect medium from the old generation to the new. The iPad, on the other hand, has a smart keyboard, and this one right here is a price of $170. There's also the Magic Keyboard option coming for the iPad Pro that is the same keyboard as the MacBooks, but the price of $300 makes it a little bit hard to recommend for most, because the smart keyboard works pretty well, but at the end of the day, it's not going to beat a physical keyboard like this one. The iPad does also have trackpad support, but honestly, it is just not the best experience. I would still rather use the touchscreen. As for speakers and sound quality, the MacBook Air this year had an update of 25% louder sound and also double the bass, and it sounds really good. It's definitely not where like the MacBook 16 inch is at, but on the iPad Pro side, it does have a quad speaker surround setup, and in terms of volume, I would say they're comparable, but both of which are going to be very good. I don't really think your decision should be based on just the speaker quality. On the microphone side of things though, the iPad and the MacBook did also see improvements this year, but one area that the MacBook is still very much behind on is the camera quality. It's got a webcam on the front that is 720p in 2020, which I feel like is just kind of stupid. So here's kind of like a video and audio test of the camera on the MacBook Air 2020 as well as the improved mic setup. And honestly, the sound does sound pretty good from the previous clip that I recorded, but hey guys, this is just a test of the microphone as well as the cameras on the iPad Pro 2020. As you can see, it does look a lot better, and in terms of audio quality, let me know what you think. But on the iPad side, you have a good front-facing camera as well as a dual camera setup on the back and the addition of the LiDAR sensor, which you're probably never going to use unless you're in the specific field. If you're planning to take any photos though, the iPad is going to be the obvious choice because it's got the 12 megapixel f1.8 camera for the main one as well as a 10 megapixel 2.4 ultra wide. The biggest thing though I think is really going to come down to the software experience and what you're looking for and what you're maybe used to. I don't really think it's like a very similar experience. I feel like in some ways the iPad can replace a laptop, but the overall like approach in software is definitely a lot different. The MacBook is a computer, of course, Mac OS X. It runs the same software that you're probably used to from any other Apple computer or desktop. But on the iPad side, it has a lot of the capabilities and the power of a laptop, at least in the comparable price point, but it does have optimized apps and an app-like experience that is more similar to what like an app on iPhone or iOS would run like, as opposed to a full-fledged desktop app like on the MacBook. Personally, I like the touch experience and I love the iPad for multimedia more than I like to use the MacBook for that. I also feel like it is much more portable, even though in terms of size, they're pretty comparable. So for travel, the iPad is like my all-in-one tool, but I do find when I'm trying to do like certain things such as photo editing that might need a little bit more elements or like Dropbox and back and forth, I still do prefer to have a laptop experience, and that is why in some areas I want to use the MacBook as like a daily device, but in other areas I feel like the MacBook is just a safer option. When it comes to like overall speed though, this really does depend on what you do, but I will say the iPad is better optimized. The MacBook, even with its updated specs, does make it much better than the previous generation, but in tests when it came to like graphics works and video stuff, it is really clear that the MacBook Air is just not really made for that. At the end of the day though, I'm not really going to make a choice for you. I feel like it does depend on what you specifically do, but there are clear areas where one is going to be much better than the other. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next video.